Economists are faced with a problem, and that problem is that we are trying to explain a very large phenomenon, how the economy works. And since it's so large, it's difficult for us to sometimes wrap our brains around it. So, in order to do that, to understand and to fully kind of see how things fit together, we need to use models. We use several different kinds of models, one of which is presented on your screen in front of you. It's called a circular flow diagram. And in this model, this is a very simplified model. We'll come back to this and add things to it later on. But right now, what we're looking at is a very simple model where there are only two players in the market. There are producers and there are consumers. These two players meet in two different markets. Keep in mind that a market is simply a place where buyers and sellers come together, right? Now, there are two markets in which consumers and producers meet. One of them is the factor market. The factor market is the market for inputs into production. That means anything that goes into making something else is bought and sold in the factor market. The product market, the other market, is the product market here, and the product market is the market for final goods and services, things that do not go back into production. Okay. Now, when we look at the circular flow diagram, you'll see there are two flows going on here. The arrows are going in two different directions. Let's look at the red arrows first, and let's start with consumers. How do consumers meet producers? Well, one way they meet them is in the factor market, because you and I sell our ability to work. Okay? Selling our ability to work means we look for a job, and we look in the factor market, whether that's as simple as going online to look at, monster.com or whatever the current job posting site is. You do that, or you look in the paper, or you go to a store and you say, hey, are you hiring? Whatever. But that's the factor market. That's where you and I go to sell our ability to work. Now, hopefully, when you are listing yourself as available for work, someone sees that and you meet a producer in the factor market. So as a consumer, you sell your ability to work, or you lend out money, or you rent out land, whatever you're doing, whatever factor it is you're trying to sell. But let's stick with labor. So you sell your ability to work, you find a job, you go to work. All right, that's what this line here going from the factor market to the producer is. You go to work. Now, you work for 8 hours a day, you leave behind a product. The producer then takes that product and sells the product to the product market. Product market is a store. Walmart, Amazon, whatever. It is a store. Now, in the product market, producers provide goods and services, and in this market, consumers of those goods come to get the product. Right? So here's where they meet again, in the product market, where the producers sell their goods. Now, the red line going from the product market to the consumer represents the good moving from the product market, from the store to the consumer. So these red arrows here are representing movements of goods and services. That gets measured by something we call our gross domestic product, our GDP. We'll come back to that in a couple of lectures. Now, you've got these black arrows going in the opposite direction. What are they representing? Well, think about it. You go to Walmart to buy a pen. You take the pen home. That's what this line over here is representing, you getting the pen. But in order to walk out of Walmart with the pen, what do you have to do? You have to pay for it. In order for Walmart to keep getting more pens, they have to pay BIC. They have to pay the producer. The producer, in order to keep producing, has to buy the inputs into production. So they have to pay the factor market, who in turn pays the consumer. So this clockwise flow here represents the flow of money. And that flow of money gets measured by something we call GNY, our gross national income. In equilibrium, in a point at which there's no force moving you to change, GDP has to equal GNY. Now you'll notice something else happens over here. There's waste. Producers produce garbage. There are resources that partially get used and don't go into production again or don't go to the consumers. This is a problem. Waste is a problem because those are resources that are being put in the garbage can and are not going to be used again. Another model that we use are graphs. And one of the first graphs I'd like to introduce you to is something we call a production possibility curve. Now, any graph, any model we use has certain underlying assumptions associated with it. For a production possibility curve, there are 4 assumptions that we have to make. First is that we have fixed amount of resources. There's only so much land, labor, and capital. Okay. There's fixed technology, which means there's only one way to make a good. For example, if you're making pens, there's one pen technology. If you're making coffee, there's only one coffee technology. Now, obviously, the technology to make pens is not the same as the technology to make coffee, but there's only one pen technology and only one coffee technology. The third assumption is that we have full employment. Now, this means something a little different for an economist than it does for most people. When I say full employment, I mean that all of our resources are being used, not just labor finding jobs, but we're using all of our land, we're using all of our capital, and all of our labor. Finally, the last assumption is that we only produce 2 goods. Now, this may seem like a silly assumption, but it's necessary since I can only draw in 2 dimensions. Now, let's take a look at what a production possibility curve looks like. First of all, we graph a production possibility curve in what we call goods space. You'll notice that we're measuring the amount of goods on each axis. Right. Now, if we produce pens and coffee, we could plot different combinations of these 2 goods that meet those assumptions. We use all of our resources, we have limited resources, etc. And our production possibility curve would look something like this. A curve, it should be smooth. My drawing is not very good. But a bowed out from the origin in this fashion. And what we notice that if we produce only pens, we'd be over here. If we produced only coffee, we would be over here. Now, if we started up here with pens, but decided we want coffee, what we knew is we'd have to give up some pens in order to get some coffee. So as we slide along this curve, we're giving up one good in order to get the other. And that's what we call opportunity cost. Opportunity cost measures what you have to give up in order to get something else. Now, please note, this is not in terms of money. The opportunity cost of pens is coffee. All right. Now, the location of this production possibility curve, sometimes called a production possibility frontier, is determined by those assumptions we just looked at. If we change those assumptions, then this picture would change. Let's see what would happen. If we changed coffee technology, we would obviously be able, and remember, changing technology means you're going to move to a newer technology that produces more. You would never use a new technology which produced less, all right? So in this case, if our coffee technology improved, we'd be able to get more coffee. But if we're producing only pens, we would still get the same amount of pens. So this blue curve here represents what would happen if we had a change in technology. All right. Now, what would happen if we had more resources? Well, we'd look at this. If we started back at the black curve, and now we found more land, labor, capital, we'd be able to produce more of both goods. And so you'd see a shifting out along both axes, and we'd get this red production possibility curve. The red production possibility curve represents economic growth. We have more of everything. All right, and that's a good thing. We want more of everything, but we have to be careful how we do it. Now, what happens if we have unemployment? How would we show that? Now, this you have to be careful about. The black curve represents using all of our resources. Where would we be if we did not use all of our resources? Well, we'd be below the curve. Any combination of pens and coffee which puts us below the curve would represent unemployment. Those would be considered inefficient amounts. So under the curve is inefficient. We can be there, but we're not making our maximum. Any point beyond the curve, and again, if we're sticking with this black production possibility curve, any point outside the curve is unattainable. We don't have the technology or the resources to get there. So in order to move to the blue curve, something has to change. In order to move to the red curve, something has to change. Right? Now, unemployment's a difficult thing because there are times when we don't want to use all of our resources. If we were at this X that I'm showing you here, that's kind of a lot of resources not being used. And that's probably not good. If we were closer to the curve, maybe up here, maybe we could understand giving up some things in order to squirrel some resources away for the future. For example, hopefully you don't spend all of your money every month. Maybe, you've heard of savings, putting some money aside. Well, that's kind of what we're talking about here. Sometimes it's good for the economy to hold back. And that would be just very close to the curve. We don't want to hold too many resources back. Where I show the X here is a problem because we're underutilizing our resources, and that isn't good. All right. Think about that, and we'll meet up again.